Deputy Prime Minister and Leader of the Nats, Michael McCormack, thank you for your time. So the big announcement this week has been about dam funding. We know it's been very much called for with so much drought impacting, in particular, New South Wales and Queensland. So what's new in this funding?
What's new is the fact that we are actually getting on with the job of going to be putting shovels in the ground for Dungown Dam near Tamworth. So that's a $484 million bill. That's extending that by that water capacity there by 22.5 gigalitres, a new dam 3.5 kilometres downstream on the Dungown Creek from the previous dam, which was built in 1958, which has served the Peel district very, very well. And of course we're raising Wyangla Dam's wall from 85 metres by 10 metres, and that's going to increase storage capacity by 650 gigalitres. So that's more than a Sydney Harbour capacity inland. So that's going to be great for farmers, great for flood mitigation, great for drought proofing, helping to further drought proof the west and the northwest of New South Wales.
Now, when it comes to the actual funding of it, we know the state government's put up half the cash, and a lot of this funding is from the previous drought fund announcement. So it's only about, is it a $40 million loan that the government's really come to the table?
No, we're providing of the funding, and we're providing 50% of the funding. Half it's a grant, half it's a loan. So we've already put down $3.3 billion on the table as far as our loan facility in the National Water Infrastructure Development Fund. We're extending that. We're putting down serious money, $3.5 billion. And look, we've got feasibility studies, about 71 of them out there at the moment. We've got 22 major projects on at the moment. Scottsdale Dam is just about to be commissioned in January, already more than half full. 16 dams have been built in Tasmania of the last 20 in Australia. We need to get on with building major dams. We're doing just that. And when we've started these projects and we've exhausted the funds available, well, we'll put new money down on the table. That's how serious we are. We want to build dams. We are building dams. We're getting on with the job. I want to work with states which are going to be able to work with us, which are going to be doing it collaboratively and cooperatively. I call on the Queensland Labor government to stop the talk, stop the conversations about Rookwood Weir, and just get on with building that. We put $176.1 million on the table in May last year. We went there in good faith. Queensland government came on the journey with us, and now they're stalling. They want to reduce the capacity. They want even more money. Well, look, let's stop having the conversations and just get on with building that particular water infrastructure facility near Rockhampton, as we said we would, as we agreed. We're getting on with the job of Emu Swamp Dam and in Stanthorpe in the Granite Belt, and the local irrigators have put $24.3 million of their own money on the table. We've put $47 million, including $5 million of enabling roads. That's going to create 700 jobs in the Granite Belt, the very dry Granite Belt near Stanthorpe. The Queensland government just has to get on board, as does other states.
And when it comes to other big news for the Nats and the regions, also this new fish kill strategy has been announced. An extra $300,000 in the scheme of things, that will disappear very quickly. How effective do you think this extra money will really be?
Well, I know we've bred up the fish stocks, and I know the New South Wales government through Adam Marshall and our own David Littleproud and Bridget McKenzie, indeed, our Minister for Water Resources, our Minister for Agriculture federally, have worked very closely together to see what we can do. Look, obviously, as there's less water in the system than there was last year when we had those fish kill incidents. There have been a number of fish kill incidents, hundreds in fact, since 1982. And the fact is, it has been a very, very prolonged drought, this one, for some the worst in memory. And we fear that there will be more fish kill incidents. So certainly Adam Marshall was in the media saying that very thing yesterday. So we've made some good progress. We've put down some serious money. We've done some things as far as breeding fish and making sure that we increase the stocks. But the fact is, we can't make it rain. We wish we could.
Don't we all? But with when you say it's the worst drought in history, in living memory.
For many years.
For many years, yeah. Isn't that an indication that we should be extending the household allowance scheme then? Because if people are dealing with worse circumstances than they ever have before, why put them on the same 4-year limit?
Well, we are indeed, and we've made some considerable changes in that regard. And of course, we've continued to provide assistance, $7 billion already, more than that. And it's not just farm household assistance; it's also putting real cash on the table with the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal, so that people can get their groceries through Rotary and through other other organisations. I know the Country Women's Association have benefited from some of those programs that we've put in place. New South Wales government has as well, and I know the Victorian government has put on money on the table in recent times. And look, we're working together. I know our farmers are a resilient bunch. I know they're hurting at the moment. I know that as well as anybody. My own electorate of Riverina is hurting badly, and we'll get through this. It will rain. There's been some good showers in Tenterfield and other areas. Very, very necessary rain just over the weekend, and so we have tweaked the farm household assistance. We have tweaked those measures to make it more available to more people, more accessible, and we've certainly got rural financial counsellors on the ground to sit across the table with people. I would urge and encourage farmers and their families not to self-assess, to continue to seek what assistance is available, and we'll continue to work with them.
So in that way, you kind of disagree with your colleagues then, because Bridget McKenzie said if you can't make your farm profitable after 4 years, maybe you should consider moving on, and Barnaby Joyce has said similar things as well.
No, well, I understand that too, and certainly I don't disagree with that sentiment. It's tough though, but for some farmers, yes, you know, they probably need to look at how they're farming and what they're doing, and perhaps even look at diversifying into other farming areas. And look, I'm pleased that
does that mean leaving the land though when you say diversifying to the other farming areas?
Well, looking at what they're actually doing, looking at actually how they're doing it. But look, the rains will come. There's no doubt. There's no question that the rains will come.
So
we want to make sure. No, I don't at all. I don't at all disagree with Bridget, and Bridget wants to increase, as I do, our agricultural output by at $60 billion at the moment, to increase it to $100 billion. We've got a plan and a vision and a blueprint to do just that by 2030, and we can only do it by adding water. We're doing that at the moment. Bridget and I spoke very much at the weekend over what we're doing as far as water infrastructure is concerned. We're very much in step with our farmers as far as providing the assistance that they need to get them through this drought. I know the states are providing fodder assistance and transport subsidies. We're all working closely together. We can't make it rain. If we could, we would.
Absolutely, but for those farmers who haven't run a profit for 4 years and can't feed themselves but on their farms, is the advice not to leave, to do something else?
Well, it's difficult. They have to assess their own individual circumstances, and I wouldn't be one to actually point to any farmer and say, you need to get off the land, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. They have to be able to make sure that they work with their accountants, work with rural financial counsellors to see what's best in their own individual circumstances. I've always said don't self-assess. Look, but they need to work closely with those financial counsellors who are available, who've been made available by the Agriculture Minister, Bridget McKenzie, and David Littleproud, working together as our Natural Disaster Management Minister and former Agriculture Minister. And of course he's working with the drought at the moment. We've actually put a drought minister around the cabinet table, so we're very in tune with what's going on, and each and every one of us, Bridget, David, myself, are all in drought communities. We understand exactly what's going on in our drought communities, and we want to be there for our farmers, and we are.
Now, the big announcement today from the government and from the Treasurer has been about this inquiry into banks being more competitive with their mortgages, giving us the reasons why they're not passing on those full interest rate cuts. If the government was really serious about keeping competitiveness and accountability in mortgage broking, why is that the one part of the Banking Royal Commission recommendations that they haven't passed on?
Well, we're looking at all those things, but what I would urge and encourage people to do, if they're not happy with their banks and banks aren't passing on the full rate cuts, then perhaps look at a customer-owned banking association organisation, perhaps look at one of those great credit unions. And I know there are options out there, there are choices out there, and I'd urge and encourage customers to look at all those options.
Now, I'm familiar with those from the government talking points, so that has been what you've been pushing this morning, but is that really fair to put that back onto the customers, to say it's up to you to shop around? There's a big cost to that, and there's not much competitiveness between the big banks.
It's also looking at putting it back on the banks. The banks have to be, do the right and responsible thing, and Josh Frydenberg has been very strident in saying that very thing, and customers need to have choices. Customers need to have those rate cuts and have the ability to be able to benefit from them. And, if the government's prepared to say this is necessary, the Reserve Bank's prepared to say this is what we feel is required, then the banks should follow suit.
What does that do for deposit holders, though? They're the ones who are getting almost no interest on savings accounts, on term deposits are almost getting...
It's a very delicate balance, and appreciate that, in times of where there's high interest rates, people who have cash in the bank, and they do very nicely. But at these times when the interest rates are very low, then it is difficult, and that's why interest rate cuts should be put on so that people who have mortgages, who are struggling in the suburbs and in regional areas, can have the benefit of that.
Do you think it's a bit of a move by the government? It's a bit of a political free kick to be having a go at the banks. No one's got much sympathy for the banks anymore, but it's kind of politicising an issue that really the banks...
No, it's not politicising an issue at all. It's actually wanting to do the right thing by customers, and we've always made sure that we do the right thing by customers, do the right thing by average, ordinary, everyday Australians who are struggling. We've got the drought, of course.
Ordinary, everyday Australians have shares in banks.
Yeah, indeed they do. But we want to make sure that if their interest rate cuts need to be passed on, then of course we're going to urge and encourage the banks to do just that. Of course, we've always protected the interests of, as I say, those Mr and Mrs Average people out there. We've done it through small business tax rates, lowest tax rate since 1940. We've done it through our own personal individual tax rates cuts, and I know that certainly people have benefited from that. They wouldn't have benefited had Labor won the election on May 18, and thankfully they didn't.
Well, that's up for you. But just finally, Medivac legislation. It's been one of the big pushes from the government that they want to test Labor on in particular, but they also want to make sure that they can test those crossbench numbers as well. What's really the argument for repealing the Medivac legislation? How are you going to get those crossbenchers over the line?
Well, Matthias Cormann, I know, will do the right and responsible thing there, as he always does, and thankfully we don't have that nexus, that impediment in the way that we had in the last Parliament, and the crossbenchers are being far more sensible. They need to know, and they understand, I know, that for Australians and Australia generally, national security is of the utmost importance. We've put in place legislation to ensure that our border security is what it should be. The legislation that was passed in the last Parliament, we feel weakened that ability for Australia to say that we have tight borders, and we want to make sure that where and when possible, our borders are what we should be, are what they ought to be, and they have been, and we've stopped the boats, we've stopped people coming from our shores unnecessarily. We don't want to send signals to anywhere in the world that Australia is a soft touch or an easy touch when it comes to getting into our country an unauthorised way, and so we'll make sure that we've put the right legislation in place, and we'll make sure that we work with crossbenchers to ensure that happens.
Because Jackie Lambie said she won't horse trade on humanity, that there's nothing to be bartered for.
And I understand that. I understand that, but Jackie Lambie and others also need to understand that we had the right measures in place. Labor weakened those in the last Parliament. We want to make sure that the legislation and the border security is what it ought to be.
Michael McCormack, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Annalise.